Welcome. Today's topic looks at COVID-19 and its impact on us as beekeepers and as food businesses. Firstly, looking at us as beekeepers, and then food systems and foods dependent on bees, and then finally honey as a food. Now, the general advice for beekeepers is that we should continue to care for our bees as normal as possible, in a way that we don't compromise the welfare of our bees. And we should maintain good biosecurity at our apiary. Well, what does that mean? Well, whilst many diseases can be introduced to your hives by bees themselves, good apiary and hive hygiene can reduce the impact of disease and will help minimize the risk of disease transmitted between colonies and apiaries. In the case of COVID-19, these hygienic practices should extend to cover the hives, frames, equipment, and clothing, as well as the apiary itself. And we shouldn't share beekeeping equipment with other beekeepers, particularly hive tools, other handheld devices, protective clothing, and also ensuring that they are cleaned regularly and effectively. Now, all of this is good and is in line with the general advice on COVID-19, like washing your hands for 20 seconds using soap and hot water before and after you come in contact with any animals. Also, there are currently no restrictions on the movement of bee colonies and managing your bees, such as moving bees to fulfill pollination contracts. However, you should observe the public health guidance to prevent the spread of COVID-19 when carrying out these activities, and that includes social distancing and essential travel. Now, the import of bees are still permitted. There is no evidence to support the restrictions in international movement or trade in bees. And in the UK, I know there's no additional rules for imports of bees with respect to COVID-19. Now, husbandry techniques are recommended to help minimize swarming. Yet, should you need to respond to collect a swarm, again, you should follow the guidelines on social distancing when collecting that swarm. And if that's not possible, then the swarm should not be collected. Therefore, trying to prevent a swarm is really the best approach. Agriculture is considered essential work, yet farmers need to adhere to social distancing requirements. But they can also be affected by other regulations and changes along the food supply chain, such as the closing of restaurants. While some farm work can easily continue with little interruption, for example, many US farmers producing staple crops such as wheat and rice do so with very limited human-to-human contact and fall in line with the guidelines for limiting the spread of coronavirus. The International Food Policy Research Institute reported that COVID-19 does not currently pose a major threat to the global food security as adequate stores of staple foods remain available. But higher value and more specialized crops face greater issues, such as some fruits and organic produce grown by smaller farms, which generally require much more labor, and they are often sold directly to restaurants and farmers markets, many of which are now closed or have restricted service. So even if these farmers are able to continue to work, they may have limited place to sell their goods. Therefore, these higher value goods are also more likely to experience a price increase caused by COVID-19 disruptions. Now, if we take a look at marine as an example, growers of blueberries import 50,000 beehives annually for the spring bloom. As blueberries rely heavily on bees for pollination because their narrow flowers are not well adapted for wind pollination, and the native bee pollinations are not large enough to support the state's 3,800 acres, blueberry growers rent bees to boost their yields, as do growers of almonds in California. Now, as transporting these hives requires special training, if a driver falls ill with COVID-19, beekeepers could struggle to get their bees on site. And without these bees, yields could take a serious hit. For example, a single hive can increase blueberry yields of up to 1,000 pounds in weight. And as Covid-19 leads to widespread income losses, fewer customers may be able to afford these specialised or high-value products, including organic vegetables. Also, if additional environmental stresses do arise this season, such as flooding or drought, then this industry will become more vulnerable, and all of this adds up to a much harder season. Now, there are currently no reported cases of COVID-19 being linked to contamination of food or its ingredients. The main risk of transmission is in the form of close contact with infected people. Even if surfaces or packaging have been contaminated, the virus will only survive on these surfaces for a short period of time. The current information states that the virus could survive up to 3 days on hard surfaces depending on the material. However, the numbers of the virus will considerably reduce over that time as it dies off. The advice for food businesses is to maintain good hygiene practice, as simple household disinfectants can kill it, and so will thorough cooking. Yet it is possible for infected workers to introduce the virus to food they are working on, or onto surfaces, by coughing, sneezing, or hand contact. So businesses should ensure that staff should not work if they have any symptoms of COVID-19, and that all workers follow strict personal hygiene practices to prevent the contamination through food processing. While honey can easily get contaminated during the process of its production by bees, microorganisms also get introduced into honey by us during harvesting and processing. And this includes the use of equipment, containers, even the wind and dust. Yet the status of these microorganisms found in honey remain dormant. It is only the spore-forming microorganisms that survive in honey by remaining dormant. Non-spore-forming bacteria, such as vegetative forms, are not normally present in honey. And this is because of the low moisture content and high acidity in the honey that prevents them from surviving. This makes honey one of the safest and most shelf-stable food products that you can eat. So, raw honey or pasteurized honey? Well, raw honey comes straight from the hive and contains everything. With filtration of raw honey, impurities like debris and air bubbles are removed so that honey stays as a clear liquid for longer. Pasteurized honey is where honey has been heat treated to 71 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit and cooled quickly. And this improves the honey's appearance, increases its shelf life, and also kills any yeast cells, preventing fermentation. It can also decrease the nutritional value of honey too. So unlike milk and juice, honey is not pasteurized solely for food safety reasons, but rather for quality purposes. So to recap, we've just touched on the subjects of advice for beekeepers and food businesses, food systems and foods dependent on bees, and contamination and honey as a food. So now I'd like to open the session up for questions. So please feel free to ask a question and share how COVID-19 has affected your beekeeping or business. Thank you. Leslie, who's first with a question?
Looks like Carla has a question.
Okay.
So, all right, go ahead, Carla.
Yes, I have a question.
So if you turn your camera on, we should be able to see you as well.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, hello, Carla.
Hi. So I have a question about face masks and contamination for both bees and the honey produce. Do you recommend wearing masks all the time? And does it need to be a specific type of mask, or can it be any homemade face mask that you can wear?
Well, there's a couple of answers to this. Now, I personally always wore a face mask when attending my bees, and that's because I suffer from mild asthma, and I find that the smoker doesn't actually do my health much good. So I wear a thicker face mask anyway, and sometimes with a charcoal lining. However, the issue here is the contamination is coming from you rather than from the bees. So, of course, COVID-19 is spread through coughing, sneezing, and water droplets. So any type of mask that covers your mouth and your nose while beekeeping is a good idea. And that will prevent the contamination of the COVID virus actually then going to your beehives. And that's probably more beneficial for the workers you're working with as well, because COVID-19 will only remain active for 3 or 4 days. So if anyone else is visiting your hive and touching that hive in that period of time, and of course they may contract it. So it is a general good practice. And the same for harvesting as well. If you're harvesting in a group and you're in a factory or you're doing it at home, wearing protective clothing anyway is always a good idea, because you don't want to be passing pathogens onto the produce anyway. Now, again, in honey, viruses don't actually last that long due to the acidity of the honey. But you also don't want to pass any spore-bearing pathogens into the honey anyway. So it's always good practice to wear a face mask.
Thank you.
Hello, Leslie. Is there anyone else who's asking a question?
Yes, we had somebody contact us as a last-minute question, wanting to know, can their bees get COVID-19?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the short answer is no. I've done a little bit of research on, and there's a guy called David Burns, who's actually done a bit more research on this. What I can do is provide the link to that research. I've only read it briefly, so I can't really comment on it further, but the summary is no, it can't, simply because of the type of insect that they are.
Right.
So we are running out of time. We've been going for nearly half an hour now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up the meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you next time.